The road did not appear on recent maps, not on apps, not in official county records. And yet it existed, a long strip of worn asphalt cutting through the fields like a badly healed scar, crossing miles of dead plantations, abandoned churches, and towns that seemed frozen in time. The wind there did not blow like it did elsewhere. It crawled, sliding low, carrying with it an ancient smell of rust, damp soil, and something else. Something too organic to be ignored. In that forgotten stretch of the American interior, time followed its own rhythm. The seasons hesitated. Summer lingered too long. Autumn arrived without falling leaves. And every 23 years, for exactly 23 days, something awakened. Few knew this. Fewer still survived to tell it. On the night it all began again, the sky was heavy, buried beneath thick clouds that hid the moon like an eye deliberately shut. A school bus moved slowly along the road, weak headlights struggling against the dense darkness. Inside it, a group of college students was returning from a regional sports tournament. Nervous laughter echoed, mixing with the sound of the aging engine and the metallic groan of the chassis. Among them were Ethan Moore, an anthropology student obsessed with local legends, Claire Donovan, whose face carried an inexplicable exhaustion, Marcus Hale, far too restless for that hour of the night, Lydia Brooks, who could not take her eyes off the window, and Noah Whitaker, the substitute driver, hired at the last minute after the regular one refused the route, claiming personal problems. The road seemed to stretch farther than it should. Minutes turned into long intervals without reference. Poles appeared and vanished. Old signs emerged with names scratched out, burned away, or simply ripped off. On one of them, partially swallowed by vegetation, it was still possible to read, "Do not look back." No one commented, but everyone felt it. Lydia was the first to notice. Something was moving in the field to the right of the bus, matching the vehicle's speed. It was not running. It was not walking. It simply was there. A silhouette too tall, too thin, moving effortlessly between rows of dried corn like a conscious shadow. She tried to ignore it, blinked, looked again. It was still there. Lydia's heart began to beat out of rhythm. She whispered to Claire, pointing outside. Claire frowned, trying to see, and then went pale. That was not an animal. It did not move like a deer, nor did it carry the weight of an ordinary man. Its shoulders were too broad, its arms hung too long, nearly brushing the ground, and there was something wrong with its head, slightly tilted as if observing. The bus passed an old church, isolated in the middle of nowhere. Its walls were carved with knife-etched symbols. The roof had partially collapsed. Hanging from the broken tower, a rusted bell swayed even without enough wind to move it. The moment the headlights illuminated the churchyard, everyone on the bus felt the same collective shiver, as if they had crossed an invisible boundary. The engine sputtered. Noah slapped the steering wheel, cursing under his breath. The bus slowed, groaning, until it came to a complete stop. The silence that followed was unnatural. No crickets, no insects, not even the wind. That was when the smell arrived. A powerful stench of old meat mixed with something sweet and rotten flooded the inside of the vehicle. Some covered their noses. Others felt immediate nausea. Ethan, sweating cold, experienced a strange sensation, as if that smell were familiar, even though he had never encountered it before. Outside, footsteps echoed. Slow, deliberate, too heavy to be human. A shadow crossed the side of the bus, tall enough to cover the upper windows. Claws, long, curved, irregular, scraped against the metal, producing a sound that made bones vibrate. Something was breathing outside. Not like a tired animal, but like a predator savoring the moment before the attack. No one screamed. No one moved. The evil that had awakened on that road was not in a hurry. It was hungry, and that was only the first sign that the 23 days had begun again. The first impact did not come with a direct attack. It came with the slow, suffocating certainty that something had chosen them. The bus remained motionless for long seconds that felt like minutes. The engine failed once more, coughing out a dry sound before dying completely. Noah tried turning the key again, but the dashboard went dark, as if the power had been drained from the inside out. It was not a normal breakdown. It was as though the vehicle itself had given up on existing in that place. Outside, the footsteps stopped. That silence was worse than any sound. Claire felt her stomach twist, instinct screaming for her to run, even without knowing where. Lydia kept her eyes locked on the window, unable to blink. She knew, with a conviction that did not come from logic, that if she looked away, something would move. Then a low sound echoed from above. It was not an impact. It was dragging. Something heavy moved slowly across the roof of the bus, pressing down on the metal, making the structure groan. Dust fell from the interior lining. A sharp crack ran along the side of the vehicle when a claw pierced the bodywork, leaving 3 deep grooves like marks from rusted blades. Someone began to cry silently. Ethan felt a strange pressure in his chest, as if the air had grown thicker. His mind, trained to seek explanations, failed completely when he heard the sound that came next. A wet rustling, accompanied by an irregular beating. Wings. The horror materialized abruptly. One of the side windows exploded inward. Shards of glass flew down the aisle, cutting skin, tearing out short, suffocated screams. Through the opening, something forced its way inside. An arm far too long, covered in grayish dried skin, ended in thin fingers tipped with curved black claws, sharp as butcher's hooks. The creature smelled the people. Literally. The inhalation was deep, animalistic, but there was intelligence in it. It was not random. The deformed snout, a grotesque mixture of human features and something ancient, moved slowly from one face to another, as if evaluating, choosing. When its eyes revealed themselves, panic fully took hold. They were too deep set, too dark, but alive. They shone with an ancient awareness, heavy with hunger, pleasure, and recognition. The creature tilted its head, watching Marcus, who trembled violently in the back seat. An almost imperceptible sound escaped the monster's throat, something between a click and a grotesque purr. The choice had been made. The arm withdrew for a second, only to return with brutal force. The claws tore through Marcus's chest with absurd ease. There was no struggle, no chance. His body was pulled against the shattered window, bones breaking, blood splattering across seats and ceiling. The scream was short, cut off by a final crack as his neck bent at an impossible angle. The entire bus plunged into chaos. Screams erupted. People stood, stumbling over one another. Claire was thrown into the aisle, tasting metal in her mouth. Lydia screamed Marcus's name over and over, but the creature was already dragging his mutilated body outside, hauling it into the darkness of the field like a freshly claimed trophy. The wings spread. The sound was dry, powerful. A single beat lifted dust, dead leaves, and fragments of glass. For a brief second, everyone saw the full silhouette of what hunted them. Tall, thin, with enormous wings attached to a body that looked stitched together from remnants of other lives. Then it vanished into the sky. Silence returned, heavy, absolute, broken only by hysterical sobbing and the drip of blood onto the asphalt. Ethan fell to his knees. His eyes were fixed on the destroyed window, on the trail of blood disappearing into the plantation. In that moment, he understood something, not with words, but with primal terror. It had not attacked on impulse. It had not been a random encounter. The creature was in a cycle, and they were trapped inside it. Before anyone could process what had happened, a new sound echoed down the road. An old engine, low, irregular. Headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the darkness like blades of yellow light. An old truck approached. When it stopped beside the bus, a man stepped out slowly. His face was carved by time. His eyes carried a fear that did not come from that night, but from memories far older. He took in the blood, the broken glass, the shocked faces. Then he said, in the heavy voice of someone who had seen this before, "He's back. And when he comes back, he never stops with the first one." Far away in the moonless sky, something screamed. It was not a sound of triumph. It was a warning. The man who stepped down from the truck was named Walter Greaves. The name sounded far too ordinary for someone whose eyes carried such ancient terror. He asked no immediate questions. He simply assessed the bus, the blood, the empty space where Marcus had been moments before. Then he lifted his gaze toward the sky, as if expecting something to descend again. "He won't come back right now," he murmured. "He always takes the first one to mark the beginning." Walter led the survivors to his farm a few miles away, an isolated stretch of land surrounded by dead fields and corroded fences. The house creaked in the wind, built on a foundation far older than its time. Inside, the smell of damp wood and kerosene mixed with something metallic, like old blood soaked into the walls. No one slept. When morning came, it brought no relief. Daylight only revealed how far they were from any help. No signal, no visible nearby road. And above all, the constant sensation of being watched, even under the sun. It was in the kitchen, while the kettle boiled forgotten on the stove, that Walter began to speak. He said that region had no true name. Maps referred to it by old county codes, but the older residents, the few who remained, knew it as the territory of the cycle. Every 23 years, for 23 days, something awakened beneath the earth, in abandoned churches, forgotten caves, and fields where no one dared plant anymore. It was not a demon in the common religious sense, nor was it an animal. Walter described the creature as something incomplete, an existence that could not sustain itself. It needed to reassemble, to replace parts of its own body, swapping organs, bones, and skin like broken tools. He eats in order to continue being, Walter said, and he chooses. He always chooses. Ethan listened with obsessive attention. Each word seemed to lock into place pieces he hadn't known were missing. Walter led the group to a locked room in the basement. Down there, the walls were covered with old newspapers, yellowed photographs, and pages torn from books that seemed older than the country itself. There were reports of disappearances at regular intervals, entire groups vanishing on rural roads, churches found empty except for dark stains on the floor, a team of students attacked on a highway decades earlier, an entire village abandoned after a single night. In one of the photographs, Claire felt her stomach drop. It was an old image of a destroyed school bus. The damage was identical. The position, the pattern of violence, everything. "It's not the first time he's attacked like this," Lydia whispered. Walter nodded. "He learns with every cycle, improves, adapts." Among the papers was something even more disturbing. Drawings made by children across decades. Always the same tall figure, wings spread wide, hollow eyes. In some, it wore pieces of human clothing. In others, body parts appeared poorly fitted, stitched, as if they didn't belong. There were symbols as well. Marks carved into churches, caves, and barns. The same pattern repeated over and over, an incomplete circle cut through by irregular lines. "They're warnings," Walter explained. "The old ones tried to contain it, not kill it, contain it, but they failed." He spoke of the oldest known origin, long before roads, before churches, before towns. The creature already existed, sleeping beneath the earth, awakened by natural cycles no one fully understood. Some believed it emerged from primitive rituals. Others believed it had always been there, a flaw in creation itself. What everyone agreed on was simple. It could not be permanently destroyed. The creature felt fear, pleasure, curiosity. It knew how to imitate human sounds. It knew how to wait. And most terrifying of all, it knew how to recognize the specific fear it needed. "It senses what's missing in you," Walter said, staring at Ethan. "If you fear losing your eyes, it will want your eyes. If you fear your heart failing, it will desire your heart." That night, the final revelation came without warning. The sound of wings cut through the sky at dusk. A violent crash shook the house. Something struck the roof with brutal force, shattering tiles. A putrid stench flooded the basement. The creature had found their trail, and now it knew where they were. Walter slammed the metal basement door shut and faced the group, his face drained of color. "Now you understand," he said. "This isn't about surviving an attack. It's about enduring the 23 days, knowing that every night it will come back better than before." Above them, claws began to scrape against the wood, slowly, patiently, like something that had all the time in the world. The first night after the revelations did not end when the sun rose. It merely fractured into fragments of terror that refused to leave the mind. The sound of claws on the roof stopped shortly before dawn, but no one believed that meant safety. The silence left behind was heavier than the attack itself. It was the silence of something that knew the hunt had only begun. Walter did not allow anyone to leave the house during the day. He said the creature watched from a distance, learning patterns, memorizing scents, movements, weaknesses. The sun did not drive it away, it only made it patient. Meanwhile, the group began to deteriorate from the inside. Claire started hearing voices, whispers that appeared when she was alone, calling her name in different tones, some gentle, others accusatory. Lydia could no longer look at mirrors. She swore her reflection blinked out of sync. Noah, the driver, shook constantly and repeated that something felt wrong in his chest, as if his heart were being watched from the inside. Ethan tried to keep his mind occupied, studying every paper, every symbol, every account. But the more he read, the more he understood that the creature did not merely kill, it dismantled slowly. The terror was not only physical, it was psychological. It infiltrated the mind, weakened it, created fractures before attacking. On the third day of the cycle, the first mistake was made. One of the young women, Maya Collins, could not endure the confinement any longer. She said she needed air, that she could not stay there waiting to die. She took advantage of a moment of distraction and ran toward the cornfield, ignoring Walter's desperate shouts. They heard the sound seconds later, a beating of wings so powerful the ground seemed to vibrate. A single scream, short, abruptly cut off. When silence returned, Maya no longer existed. No body, no trace. Only deep marks in the soil, as if something had landed there with violence. That night, the creature returned different. It did not attack immediately. It circled the house, walked around it, leaving irregular footprints in the damp earth. At times, it imitated human voices, as Marcus's, sounds of crying, pleas for help. It tested reactions, observed who approached the windows, who covered their ears, who trembled the most. Then it chose again. The attack came from the back of the house. The door was ripped away as if it were paper. Walter tried to react with an old weapon, but the shot was useless. The creature moved too fast. A dry blow, a brutal impact. Walter's body was hurled against the wall, bones breaking with a sound no one would ever forget. Before leaving, the creature did something even worse. It looked directly at Ethan. It was not an empty stare. It was recognition, as if it were saying, "You understand, and that is why you will be the last." In the days that followed, the terror spread beyond the farm. A nearby village was found abandoned, houses open, food still on the tables, no signs of struggle. Only marks on rooftops and symbols hastily carved into doors and churches, like desperate attempts at warning. The group moved, believing that motion might confuse the creature. It was a fatal mistake. On the road, the truck they were using was attacked from above. The impact flipped the vehicle, throwing them into the ditch. Noah could not get up. The creature took him slowly, without hurry, as if it wanted the others to watch. Each night, fewer people remained. With each attack, the creature seemed more complete, stronger. New parts fitted into its deformed body, like a living puzzle assembled from human remains. By the 15th day, only Ethan, Claire, and Lydia were left. They understood, too late, that the cycle did not demand only enough victims. It demanded total despair, the complete collapse of hope, the absolute certainty that there was no escape. And when that certainty settled in, the creature began to prepare the end. On the horizon, dark clouds gathered again. The same sky as the beginning, the same smell, the same omen. The cycle was approaching its peak, and the final confrontation had already been set, whether they wanted it or not. The abandoned church rose at the end of the road like a rotten tooth embedded in the field. The collapsed roof seemed to bow beneath the weight of the loaded sky, and the broken tower pointed toward the clouds like an accusing finger. Ethan, Claire, and Lydia arrived there guided by a mixture of desperation and intuition, the same force that, according to the old accounts, always led the survivors to the place where the cycle culminated. The wind intensified as they approached. Each gust carried the smell they had learned to fear: old flesh, rust, and disturbed earth. The bell in the tower swayed without being touched, emitting a low, irregular sound, like a diseased heart marking the wrong time. Inside, the floor was covered with symbols carved over decades. Some were recent, others nearly erased by time. Old candles, reduced to hardened wax, surrounded the central altar. a structure of dark stone stained by something that was not merely mold. The air was thick, hard to breathe. Ethan felt the pressure in his head increase, as if the place amplified forbidden thoughts. In that instant, he understood that the church was not a refuge. It was a stage. It had always been. The first sound came from the roof. A dry impact, followed by the cracking of breaking wood. Dust fell in thick clouds. The wings appeared first, tearing through the opening like living shadows. Then the entire body descended violently, landing on the altar and splitting the stone. The creature was different. Taller, broader. The skin looked newly adjusted, still marked by irregular stitching. One eye was far too human. The other, deep and black, seemed to absorb the surrounding light. It inhaled deeply, like someone reaching the end of a long journey, and finding exactly what they were looking for. Claire screamed when the sound came from the creature's mouth. Marcus's voice, Walter's, Maya's, all mixed together, overlapping, distorted, loose words, fragments of pleas for help, broken laughter. It was not simple imitation. It was memory. It was mockery. The creature advanced without haste. Ethan tried to recite the symbols he had studied, believing there might be a pattern, a limit, something that could weaken it. But the monster reacted with a movement too fast to follow. A blow hurled Ethan against the wall, shattering wooden pews like matchsticks. Lydia ran to help, but the creature intercepted her midway. A claw closed around her torso, lifting her off the ground. For a second she stared into those eyes with terrifying clarity. "He sees what's missing," she managed to say, before the dry sound of breaking bones echoed through the nave. Claire screamed until her voice failed. The creature dropped Lydia's lifeless body and turned its attention to Claire and Ethan. The cycle demanded more than death. It demanded choice, conscious despair, the certainty that every decision was useless. Bleeding, Ethan realized what the accounts had never stated explicitly. The final confrontation was not about killing the creature. It was about feeding it enough so that it would sleep again. He struggled to his feet, drawing the monster's attention. He shouted, insulted it, provoked it. The creature tilted its head, curious, advanced. At the last second, Claire ran toward the church basement, where an opening led to ancient tunnels dug long before the building existed. The creature hesitated, sniffed the air, smiled, a twisted, impossible smile, and decided. It left Ethan bleeding on the floor and followed Claire into the underground darkness. Down there, the confrontation ended the way it always did, with silence. When the sun rose, the church was in ruins, the altar destroyed, the floor marked by deep drag marks. No sign of the creature, no sign of Claire. Ethan woke up alone. The cycle had been satisfied. For now. Dawn brought no comfort. It only exposed the remains. Ethan awakened among the rubble, his body covered in dust and dried blood. Every breath hurt, as if his lungs were filled with ground glass. The church, now silent, seemed smaller in the weak morning light, but no less threatening. The altar was split in two. The symbols on the floor had been erased, as if something had licked them off the stone during the night. Claire was not there. No body, no blood trail, only deep marks on the basement floor, dragging toward the underground tunnels, now partially collapsed, sealed by ancient earth and rock. It was as if the ground itself had closed its mouth after swallowing what it needed. Ethan staggered out of the church. The field around it was unnaturally still. Scarecrows hung crooked among the dry crops. Old clothes inflated by the wind, arms open in positions that resembled improvised crucifixion. For a moment, he swore one of them slowly turned its head as he passed. He did not turn back to confirm. The road received him the same way it had at the beginning. Long, empty, indifferent. After hours of walking, a car appeared in the distance. The driver stopped upon seeing him, shocked by his condition. Asked what had happened. Ethan opened his mouth and could not answer. How could one explain a cycle repeating for centuries? How could one translate a hunger that learned? He was taken to a hospital in a neighboring county. There, doctors treated his wounds, and police asked questions. They wrote down names, dates, places. Everything was filed under the category of collective traumatic event with undetermined causes. The bus was never found. Walter's farm no longer appeared in recent records. The nearby village was officially declared abandoned for economic reasons. Nothing mentioned wings, claws, cycles. With time, Ethan tried to rebuild his life. He changed states, changed his name, avoided rural roads, avoided old churches, avoided anything that reminded him of fields too wide or skies too vast. But the terror no longer needed to be outside. Sometimes at night he woke up to the smell, other times to the distant sound of wings cutting through the air. He dreamed of Claire, trapped in a place too dark to be called a cave, alive, but not whole. He dreamed of eyes watching from inside the earth, waiting. 23 years later, almost to the same day. Ethan was already an old man when the news aired a short, nearly irrelevant segment about a school bus that had disappeared on a secondary road in the countryside. The images showed a stretch far too familiar. An abandoned church in the background, dry fields, a broken bell swaying in the wind. The reporter mentioned that residents had reported strange sounds during the night. Marks on rooftops, a strong smell in the air. Ethan turned off the television with trembling hands. In the living room mirror, something caught his attention. His reflection looked different, the eyes too sunken, the skin marked by lines he did not remember having before. When he blinked, he swore the reflection lagged behind him by a fraction of a second. Outside, in the darkening sky, something screamed. It was not rage. It was not pain. It was awakening. Somewhere beneath the earth, in forgotten churches and roads that do not appear on maps, the cycle was beginning again, stronger, hungrier, more aware. And this time it no longer needed to search for survivors. It already knew exactly where to begin. 23 years do not erase an ancient hunger. They only refine it. The road came back into existence before it was even remembered. Like a wound reopening on its own, the asphalt reappeared among fields that should no longer have existed, cutting through the forgotten interior of the country with the same cruel precision as always. Rusted signs surfaced, abandoned churches began to creak again in the wind, and the smell, that impossible-to-mistake smell, returned before any news report, before any official disappearance. In the small town of Ravens Crossing, no one spoke of cycles. No one spoke of 23 days. But everyone felt it. Animals vanished. Rooftops were found marked at dawn. People woke with the sensation that something had breathed inside their rooms during the night. The first to die was a night watchman. There were no direct witnesses, only the body found near the old road, missing specific parts, removed with surgical precision. The newspapers called it an animal attack. The residents pretended to believe it, but the sky that night had beaten wings. The second cycle did not begin with screams. It began with curiosity. Daniel Rowe, a disgraced investigative journalist, arrived in Ravens Crossing chasing a story too small to save his career, but strange enough to capture his attention. He did not believe in legends, only in patterns. And there were too many patterns there. With him were Amelia Grant, a documentary photographer, Lucas Bennett, a local mechanic who knew every forgotten road in the region, Naomi Keller, a newly arrived substitute teacher, and Evan Rowe, Daniel's son, who should never have been brought to that place. On the first night, Amelia photographed something in the sky. On the second, Lucas found marks on the roof of his workshop. On the third, Naomi heard a voice calling her name, her mother's voice, dead for more than 30 years. The cycle was active, and this time it would not be satisfied with killing. Daniel found the name Ethan in old archives, a survivor, a man who vanished from records shortly after a series of events filed as unrelated tragedies. When he finally found him, living in isolation in a house surrounded by symbols carved into the wood, Ethan did not pretend surprise. "It woke up, didn't it?" he asked before Daniel could open his mouth. Ethan explained what he had learned too late. The cycle evolves. The creature does not merely reassemble itself. It inherits memories. Each victim leaves something behind: fear, voice, instinct, and sometimes consciousness. In the last cycle, Ethan said, it began choosing people who observed, who recorded, who tried to understand. Daniel felt the weight of that realization too late, because he was being observed. The creature did not attack every night. It left signs. Scarecrows changed position. Photographs revealed shadows that had not been there. Recordings captured wings beating in sync with human heartbeat. Lucas was next. There was no struggle, only the metallic sound of something landing, followed by absolute silence. His body was found days later, missing exactly what he feared losing most: his hands. Amelia tried to flee. The road brought her back. It always does. Naomi went mad before she died. She began writing symbols without knowing why, repeating patterns she had never studied. When they found her, her face was intact, but her eyes were not. The cycle was not merely killing, it was teaching. Ethan understood before everyone else. "It doesn't just want to sleep this time," he said. "It wants to remain." The creature appeared on the 19th day, not as a distant shadow, but at the center of the town, perched atop the tower of the old school. Its wings covered the sky like a living eclipse. Its eyes, now almost human, scanned the few remaining survivors. It spoke, not with one voice, with many. "I remember. I learn. I continue." Daniel realized the final mistake. Recording, documenting, and trying to expose the cycle, they had given the creature something new: history, and history never dies. Evan was taken in front of his father, not out of necessity, but by choice. The 23rd day dawned far too silent. The creature did not leave. The marks did not disappear. The symbols remained. The wings did not fold. Ethan died that morning, smiling in a way that felt wrong, as if he had finally understood something far too late. Months later, similar roads began appearing in other states. Abandoned churches, dry fields, identical reports, but out of sync. The cycle had fragmented. It was no longer one. And somewhere, a child was drawing black wings without knowing why. The world was no longer facing a monster. It was facing a living pattern, and it had learned how to spread. Humanity's most serious mistake has always been believing that evil needs fixed roots. When the first cycle fragmented, there were no earthquakes and no signs in the sky. No ancient prophecy was fulfilled in any spectacular way. What happened was worse. Normality. Roads began to appear where they should not exist. New ones that were far too old. Paths that did not appear on modern maps, yet showed up in aerial photographs like fresh scars. Abandoned churches were once again found open. Fields that no one cultivated began to exhale the same smell: violated earth, old flesh, and rust. The cycle had not migrated, it had learned how to replicate. In a remote village in Eastern Europe, a group of archaeologists disappeared after opening an underground crypt linked to pre-Christian ritual. The walls were covered with symbols identical to those found on the other side of the ocean. None of them spoke English. None knew the American legends. And yet, the drawings were the same. In Latin America, an inner-city bus was found empty on a desert road. Windows intact, doors closed, no bodies, only deep marks on the roof and a single survivor in a catatonic state, repeating the same phrase in languages he did not speak. He does not come from a place. He comes from a time. In Central Asia, shepherds reported something crossing the sky at night, too large to be a bird, too silent to be an airplane. The next morning, they found the herd intact, except for one animal, carefully dismembered, as if someone were practicing. The pattern repeated itself. Always 23 days, always precise choices, always enough survivors to spread the story, never enough to stop it. With the expansion, something changed in the creature's behavior. It no longer attacked only isolated groups or forgotten regions. It began to approach mid-sized cities, suburbs, places with electric light, cameras, and cell phone signal. Not to be seen, but to learn how not to be. Security footage recorded strange failures, corrupted frames, silhouettes that appeared for a single second and vanished, sounds of wings that were not captured by microphones, but caused electrical interference. Terror ceased to be immediate. It became global anticipation. People began dreaming of roads they had never traveled. Children drew winged figures with poorly fitted body parts. Adults woke with the sensation that someone had breathed far too close during the night. The cycle was now feeding on expectation as well. It did not need to kill everyone. It was enough for the world to know that it could. A new group emerged in silence. People who had survived different cycles, on different continents, in different eras. None of them had known each other before, but all shared the same symptoms: memory lapses during the night, marks on their bodies they did not remember receiving, and identical dreams. They began meeting online, in obscure forums, temporary archives, networks that vanished after a few days. They called themselves the Watchers, not out of courage, but out of guilt. They believed that surviving meant carrying a responsibility. They mapped the cycles. They discovered something even more terrifying. The intervals were shrinking. No longer 23 years, then 15, then 7, then simultaneous cycles. The world was becoming too small for the hunger that was growing. Among the Watchers, one theory became consensus, not because it was comforting, but because it explained everything. The creature was not a single entity. It was a process, an ancient error of nature, capable of replicating itself whenever it learned enough in a cycle. Each fragment carried memories of the previous one. Each new awakening made the pattern more efficient, quieter, more adaptable. It no longer needed to sleep completely, only to reduce activity. Like a virus that learns to coexist with its host. The clearest sign of the expansion came when, in a complete cycle, no one died. There were reports, marks, sounds, temporary disappearances. People found days later, changed, unable to explain where they had been. But no confirmed deaths. The Watchers panicked. That meant only one thing. The creature had found an alternative source. It was now feeding on continuous fear, not bodies, and that had no limit. Today, roads appear and disappear. Old churches are not demolished, only avoided. Reports are archived as mass hysteria, technical failures, coincidences. But the cycle continues. Not in one place. Everywhere. While you read these words, someone in another country is smelling it for the first time. Someone is hearing wings where there should be nothing but wind. Someone is being chosen, not to die, but to remember. Because now the cycle no longer needs to begin. It is already underway, and there is no longer any outside. The mistake was not realizing the cycle existed. The mistake was continuing to live as if it still had limits. After what came to be known only as the global silence, the attacks ceased for a time. No confirmed disappearances. No deaths officially linked to ancient roads, empty churches, or marks on rooftops. To the world, the terror had been nothing more than a statistical coincidence, a wave of collective hysteria amplified by the internet. But the survivors knew. They knew because the fear had not gone away. It had changed shape. People began waking up in places different from where they had fallen asleep. Not kilometers away, just meters. Enough to create doubt, enough to fracture certainty. Security cameras recorded individuals walking at night with strange movements, stopping beneath dead streetlights, staring at the sky for far too long, and then returning home as if nothing had happened. Some began dreaming of fields they had never visited, others of churches that did not exist in their cities. Children in different countries began drawing the same figures: bodies too tall, wings spread wide, hollow eyes. Parents tore up the papers. Teachers pretended not to see. The cycle was no longer attacking. It was teaching the world how to live with it. The remaining Watchers realized the pattern too late. There was no longer an epicenter, no longer a cursed region. The cycle now manifested in micro-events, scattered fragments, impossible to fully map. Each affected person carried only a piece of the experience, too small to be considered proof. But together, those pieces formed something far greater. In a port city in northern Europe, a man was found walking in circles in the middle of the night, repeating phrases in a dead language that had not been spoken for centuries. No injuries, no visible marks, only hollow eyes and a strange smell clinging to his clothes. He died days later in his sleep, with a smile far too gentle to be natural. In sub-Saharan Africa, shepherds found symbols carved into stones that had never been touched by modern tools. Symbols identical to those recorded decades earlier in the United States. When questioned, all gave the same answer. They were already there. In South America, a newly paved road began to disappear little by little, as if it were being erased. First the signs, then the markings. Finally, The asphalt itself turned back into dirt. In less than a month, it no longer existed in official records, but it existed at night. What no one immediately understood was that the cycle no longer needed a full 23 days. It was overlapped. While one region experienced an awakening, another was already in its closing phase, and a third did not even realize it had been marked. The world was not facing imminent danger. It was already inside it. The dreams intensified. People began reporting the sensation of being watched not by something external, but by something sharing the same space, as if the air had eyes, as if darkness were learning the contours of bedrooms. In hospitals, patients woke screaming after surgeries, claiming that something had looked inside them while they were unconscious. In morgues, bodies displayed internal alterations with no sign of external intervention. Not removals, adjustments. The cycle was experimenting. The creature, if it could still be called that, no longer revealed itself as before. It no longer needed visible wings. It no longer needed direct confrontation. It had understood something essential. Human fear is far more powerful when it has no clear form, when it cannot be pointed at, when it cannot be fought. The Watchers tried to warn governments, institutions, anyone still willing to listen. They were ignored, ridiculed, silenced. Some disappeared. Others went mad. The few who remained understood the final truth too late. The cycle did not want to be stopped. It wanted to be accepted. And little by little, it was succeeding. People began adapting to sleeping with lights on, avoiding certain places without knowing why, changing routes instinctively, feeling relief when a path felt wrong, even without logical explanation. That collective behavior fed the pattern. The more the world adjusted, the more stable the cycle became, until in a small coastal town, something different happened. A child did not draw wings. She drew eyes, hundreds of them spread across the paper, connected by irregular lines. When asked about the drawing, she answered with unsettling calm, "They're the places where it sees now." That same week, for the first time since the expansion began, an event occurred that could not be ignored. An entire city lost power for exactly 23 minutes. Not a normal blackout. No recorded failure. During that time, people reported the same sensation. Pressure in the air, absolute silence, as if the world itself had held its breath. When the power returned, everything appeared normal. Except for one thing. Every mirror in the city was fogged from the inside. Not by steam, by handprints. Hands that belonged to no one. That night, there were no attacks, no disappearances, no deaths. But millions of people dreamed the same dream. A sky without stars, roads crossing endlessly, and something watching from every angle at once. When they woke, many could no longer remember the faces of people close to them. Others forgot important names. Some completely lost their sense of time. The cycle had taken another step. It no longer needed to hunt individuals. It was restructuring human perception. The last Watchers finally understood the true ending that had always been implied since the first recorded cycle. The creature did not want to destroy the world. It wanted to inhabit it, not as an invader, but as an invisible part of how things functioned, like gravity, like death, like fear. And when that understanding spread, not through words but through instinct, the cycle ceased to be an event. It became a permanent state. Today, roads appear and disappear without explanation. Old churches are never fully demolished. Children continue to draw things adults have never seen. People continue waking with the certainty that something was there, and no one asks what it is anymore, because deep down, everyone already knows. The cycle did not end. It did not break. It did not fail. It won the moment the world learned how to live with it. And now, there is no longer a beginning, only the continuation of everything the creature started, and it is everywhere.